During the National Day holiday, a typhoon struck. Branches snapped and pierced the windshield of my car, injuring my shoulder. My wife, a rescue worker, chose to leave her post to help an old flame who suffers from severe depression. I didn't call her. Instead, I quietly felt the blood flowing from my wounds and waited for life or death. In the past, I would have sought help immediately, but to save me, she was unable to answer Michael Williams' call for assistance. Michael committed suicide by jumping into the river after a depressive episode, and his body was found a month later. Because I was rescued in time, my body did not suffer significant damage. She always said that she had no regrets about saving me. However, on the anniversary of Michael's death, she broke my legs and dragged me to my first love's grave, drowning me there. I only had a slight shoulder injury. John Smith, you must have intentionally made it impossible for me to save Michael. You truly have a devious mind. Michael was so kind and fragile. Why wasn't it you who died that day? I find myself back on that day, reliving the moment when my shoulder was pierced. The wind howled fiercely, nearly flipping the car over. A branch shattered the windshield and plunged violently into my shoulder. Blood is flowing, and my body is gradually turning cold. I can feel life slipping away. I hurriedly take out my phone and dial 119 for help. When the call connects, it is Sarah Davis, my wife's colleague. She tells me that Emma Johnson is on a mission and that she expected I would call, although she didn't actually think I would. A typhoon has uprooted the trees, and a branch has pierced through my windshield, impaling my shoulder. I can't move now. Fire department, hurry up and saw off the branches so I can get to the hospital. Just then, a strong gust of wind blew through, breaking the branches and causing them to fall heavily on the roof of the car, which resulted in a dent. The branch on my shoulder shifted slightly, and I couldn't help but let out a groan. On the other end of the line, Sarah nonchalantly said, "John, the situation is special today. The whole city is under lockdown. Stop acting. It's a waste of public resources. Emma is already married to you. Can't you just stay at home peacefully? This call is meant for those in need of help, not for you to create jealousy. Michael's situation is important. You shouldn't let your imagination run wild. The wind and rain outside are growing stronger, and the trees around are swaying. I don't have time to listen to Sarah's lectures." She directly hung up on the emergency call. At that moment, I realized that both my wife and I had been reborn. I never expected Emma to be so heartless, leaving me no chance at all. In my previous life, I acted similarly, immediately dialing for help, only for her to miss the opportunity to save her first love while trying to save me. That night, Michael jumped from the bridge and fell into the frigid waters below. She always claimed she had no regrets about saving me, but on the anniversary of her death, she actually sawed off my legs, leaving me to drown. She repeatedly emphasized her desire for revenge on her first love. Emma and I had been in a relationship for 5 years and married for 3, but I never expected it to end like this. As the blood flowed out of me, my body gradually grew colder. I was tightly strapped to my seat, unable to move. I wanted to grab onto a branch, but I felt powerless. Gradually, I exhausted my strength and could only weakly knock on the car window, trying to attract the attention of passers-by. As my vision blurred, a beam of light fell on my face. Before losing consciousness, I heard one last sentence. "Come quickly." When I woke up, I found myself surrounded by neighbors who were risking their safety during the typhoon to try to save me. However, Emma, who had accompanied me for many years, seemed so indifferent to my life and death. I let out a cool shout. The people around me cheered me on, encouraging me to hold on and not give up. Everyone was supporting me. We had already contacted the rescue team, so I needed to hang in there. However, Sarah felt that something was off because there were too many distress calls coming in. If it were just a few prank calls, it might be considered a joke, but the continuous incoming distress calls had made her uneasy. She began to feel uncertain. Most of the team had been sent by Emma to rescue Michael, and the remaining members were involved in the emergency response, leaving her the only one answering phone calls. Kind-hearted people around had waited for a long time but still hadn't seen the fire truck arrive. The owner of the auto repair shop brought over a chainsaw and shouted, "Let's have a few strong folks hold the branches to minimize the vibrations while I cut them. This way we can get him out." Before starting, the owner kindly said to me, "Don't be afraid, young man." I gritted my teeth and shook my head to show that I was not afraid. At that moment, my face was pale, and I was trembling from excessive blood loss. Thanks to the help of many kind-hearted people, the operation to saw the branches was progressing smoothly. They successfully pulled me out of the driver's seat of the car. In my days, I recalled the early days when I was with Emma. We met through a friend's introduction without any complicated circumstances, but we really clicked. We both enjoy stargazing, love Yuhua's novel To Live, and have a fondness for keeping houseplants and pets. I once thought this was fate's arrangement, being able to meet someone so compatible. I naively believed that Emma thought the same way. She was particularly kind to me in front of others, and everyone felt that she loved me a lot. Even I believed it myself. It wasn't until Michael appeared that I realized everything before was just my own thoughts. Because of a phone call from Michael, Emma hurriedly rushed out of her house in the early hours of a heavy snowfall, forgetting to even put on her coat. She dedicated all her time outside of work to taking care of him because he mentioned he was struggling with depression. Despite being able to seek help from family and doctors, he refused to go to the hospital or take medication, instead choosing to spend every day with another man's wife. Late at night, he was in her bedroom, and I couldn't believe their relationship was as simple as it seemed. As a man, I can understand Michael's feelings. They appear to be good friends on the surface, but there is some underlying ambiguity. John told me that if I really had something going on with Michael, would I still marry you? She hopes I won't overthink the situation and emphasizes that we are just friends. She thinks Michael is innocent and kind, and she wishes I wouldn't speak ill of him anymore. Emma often says that Michael is naive and kind, but he frequently sends me some ambiguous photos, like our reflections cuddling while watching a movie together. When we have dinner, I am especially impressed by the sight of Emma making soup for me. There are also selfies of her wearing Michael's pajamas on our wedding bed. These photos have led to many arguments between us, and each time, she always finds a reason to blame me. John, can you just stop causing trouble? Michael is suffering from depression, and everything I do is to take care of him. We are innocent. By saying and doing this, do you really want to push Michael to the brink? John, how can you be so heartless? Just think about it. If something happens to Michael, the pain she would cause me would be unimaginable. If they were truly okay, I could write my name backward. In this life, I finally understand. Some people can be disappointing, but there will always be a reward. I won't waste any more time on them. Fortunately, I have met many kind people who have helped me. However, due to excessive blood loss, my vital signs became extremely critical. In the end, Sarah called in nearby rescue personnel, and they quickly arrived at the scene together. Rescue workers pushed through the crowd and rushed over, eager to help stop my bleeding, but they didn't know where to begin. Sarah, noticing my pale complexion, couldn't help but ask, John, are you really in trouble? Emma said you had been at home. She thought your call for help was just a joke. I remained silent, quietly gazing at Sarah. The people around us began to murmur among themselves. Someone complained, your fire department's response time is too slow. Who is going to take responsibility for that? It's just 2 intersections away, and it took you over an hour to arrive. Hurry and get him to the hospital. What are you all still doing? Under the emergency instructions, Sarah and the other rescuers carefully lifted me onto the ambulance. She accompanied me to the hospital, seeing my pale face and blood-soaked body. Sarah said, John, I really thought you were joking. I'm sorry. I didn't expect this to happen. I believed you and Emma were just having a disagreement and that I was overreacting, thinking you were just being jealous. At that moment, a nurse interrupted her, saying, can you stop apologizing? You need to contact the patient's family right away, otherwise who will sign for the surgery? Yes, call. Sarah suddenly remembered that she needed to call Emma, who was comforting her first love, Michael. She tried to call several times, but no one answered. Having no other choice, she decided to reach out to her other colleagues. Something has happened to Sarah. Quick, pass the phone to Emma. I have an emergency, a colleague said with a sly smile. Emma is busy right now. That guy over there just injured his ankle, and she's giving him a foot massage. Don't tell John. The space in the ambulance was small, and I could hear everything clearly. Sarah suddenly felt awkward and quickly added, John is in trouble. He's bleeding heavily and may need urgent care. Please have Emma sign. Quick, give her the phone. The other party finally realized the seriousness of the situation and immediately went to find Emma to take the call. Emma, John has had an accident and is on his way to the hospital. You need to come quickly. They'll need a family member to sign for the surgery. Upon hearing this, Emma laughed coldly and said, "Sarah, I told you a long time ago that he was just whining. He's in such good health, how could anything happen to him?" Michael said beside her, "Is something wrong with John? You should go check it out." "I'm fine on my own. It's just that life has been really exhausting." Emma immediately hugged Michael and softly reassured her. "He's just pretending to be sick. How could anything happen to him at home? You are more important than him. I'll stay by your side. Please don't cry anymore, okay? Seeing you cry makes me feel hurt too." The nurse next to her couldn't help but think, how can women today be so indifferent? Having affairs and finding mistresses they don't even care about their husband's feelings? It's really disappointing. Emma angrily asked, "Who are you to speak to me like that?" The nurse coldly replied, "I'm saying it the way it is. I'm a nurse at the first hospital. If you have the guts, go ahead and report me. Your husband's situation is very serious. Come to the hospital quickly to sign for the surgery." The nurse hung up the phone and quietly comforted me, telling me not to get too agitated and to hold on, as we would soon reach the hospital. I recalled Emma's words, and my heart gradually sank. In my previous life, I had already seen through her true nature. How could she possibly change in this life? My vision gradually blurred, and it seemed I could see a white light calling to me. The nurse's expression suddenly turned pale. "Quick, get help. It's too late for the family to sign. The patient is about to go into shock." I opened my eyes again, feeling as though I had gone through a life and death experience. When Emma's mother came in and saw that I was awake, she quickly grabbed my hand, her expression filled with guilt. "John, don't worry. This time Emma went a bit too far, and I'll make sure to teach her a good lesson," she said. I didn't respond, just silently withdrew my hand and stopped looking at her. Emma's mother had a somewhat stiff expression. Ever since I married into the family, I had treated her as my own mother, but I am not her biological child after all. She would still unconditionally consider her own daughter first. Even though I had already made my feelings clear, Emma's mother remained persistent and continued to try to persuade me. She said she felt wronged in this relationship and that she thinks Emma is not a good person. "But you've been married for so many years, haven't you? Perhaps the person you meet in the future might be worse than Emma." Neither Emma nor I wanted this to happen. "When the time is right, I will have her apologize to you and promise never to associate with Michael again. Would you be willing to accept that?" I looked at her seriously and asked, "Mom, if I were your biological son, would you allow me to stay with someone like Emma? Although my parents are no longer here, I believe that if they knew about what I've encountered today, they would definitely support my decision to get a divorce, not wanting me to suffer in this relationship. And I must divorce her." I spoke very directly, leaving her momentarily speechless, even unable to offer any advice. In fact, deep down, Emma's mother understands that if she truly had a son, she would never let him be with a woman who still clings to her first love even in critical moments. She wanted to call Emma, but I stopped her and told my aunt that I didn't want to see her. I felt quite disgusted. She could only sneak out to make a phone call. "You girl, I brought you to the hospital. Why aren't you here? Now John is going to divorce you too." Emma casually remarked, "What trick is he up to now?" "Mom, don't believe him. He talks about wanting a divorce every day, but he has never actually gone through with it. He just uses the threat of divorce to manipulate us. Besides, John is not dead. What's the big deal?" Emma's mother was very angry and emphasized that this situation was different from the past. "The doctor said he was nearly fine. Mom, there's really no need to pretend with him. You want me to go back, right? Fine. I'll first calm Michael down, and I'll visit him when I have the time." With that, Emma hung up the phone. It was after 10 o'clock at night when Emma finally arrived. A frail-looking man followed closely behind her, gripping her hand tightly. Emma's mother directly asked me, "Why did you bring him along?" I replied, "Michael is a patient, and I couldn't leave him alone at home." I felt a sense of helplessness inside. I was the one who had nearly lost my life, lying in bed in a critical condition, yet everyone's attention was focused on him. Emma looked at me in surprise and asked, "How could this happen to you?" I calmly replied, "I encountered a typhoon, got injured by branches, and it's just luck that I survived." "What? Were all the things you said before true?" Emma asked incredulously. Michael whispered, "It's all my fault. If I didn't have depression, Emma could have arrived in time, and John wouldn't have come so close to dying. It's really my fault." As he spoke, His eyes reddened and tears streamed down his face uncontrollably. I really feel like life has no meaning. Sometimes I really admire Michael. His emotional breakdown came too suddenly, something I could never learn to handle. Emma immediately hugged him tightly, completely ignoring my feelings, and carefully wiped away his tears. She said, "Michael, don't blame yourself for this. It's his own problem. How can anyone be running around outside on a stormy day?" Emma frowned and walked over to my hospital bed, her tone softening a bit. She continued, "You have severe depression, and sometimes you can't control your emotions. It's not your fault. Don't be so upset. This isn't Michael's responsibility." I slapped Emma hard across the face. She looked at me in shock and asked, "How dare you hit me?" Clearly, she had not expected me to embarrass her in front of everyone. I looked at her, filled with disgust, and decided to divorce her. After I was discharged from the hospital, I packed up all of Emma's belongings, called a moving service, and had her things delivered to her workplace. At around 8 or 9 in the evening, the delivery from Hualala arrived, and Emma immediately called me, demanding to know, "John, what on earth are you doing?" Her voice was harsh, and I was taken aback, so I simply hung up the phone. I was left wondering about my situation. I wanted to divorce this person who had betrayed me. The house and the car were both my property before the marriage. The one who cheated is her, and now it is also she who needs to leave this home. The next afternoon, Emma returned. She found that she couldn't open the door because I had changed the locks the night before. She had no choice but to ring the doorbell repeatedly. Through the camera, I saw her displeased and impatient expression, along with Michael by her side. I didn't expect that she would still be reluctant to part with Michael in this situation. Clearly, no one was responding to her, so she called me angrily and said, "John, you're too much. We're not even divorced yet, and you've changed the locks? Open the door." I replied slowly, "You know we're still not divorced. How can you bring someone else into the house?" Emma, on the other end of the phone, was clearly taken aback, and her tone softened considerably. "John, Michael and I are really just ordinary friends, completely innocent. As a firefighter, I can't let him fall into danger. I brought him back hoping that you both could keep each other company and live better." I let out a cold laugh and replied, "Emma, have you forgotten that I want a divorce from you? It's simply outrageous that Michael wants to bring his mistress to my house. Who could say something like that, suggesting I should be with the other woman? Just the thought of her being in my home makes me uncomfortable." Upon hearing my retort, Michael's expression changed immediately. He looked helpless. He tugged at Emma's sleeve, and tears streamed down his face. Emma, visibly upset, exclaimed, "John, you don't have to be so hurtful. I've explained many times that there is no relationship between Michael and me. If we really had an issue, why would I marry you? Michael is my friend, not my affair." I gave a cold laugh and ignored her. I said I wanted a divorce, and we could discuss it tomorrow at the coffee shop downstairs. I also mentioned that this house was my property before marriage, and neither you nor that other person has any right to come in. Upon learning that I was going to discuss divorce, my good friend offered his support, but I declined outright, feeling that parting ways with someone unsuitable wasn't a big deal. The next day, Emma drove to the cafe, and I immediately spotted Michael sitting in the passenger seat. He didn't get out of the car. Emma took a seat across from me, and I pushed the divorce agreement towards her. She looked at me in astonishment and asked, "Are you really going to divorce me?" I responded with a cold laugh, "Do you really think I'm joking?" I stared at her, feeling that she was both unfamiliar and frightening, as memories of the past and present intertwined. She continued to press me, "John, is it because I didn't go to rescue you that day?" I replied, "You know I'm a rescuer. Michael's life matters too. What's wrong with saving people?" I chuckled and said, "Emma, are you referring to how you used your authority to mobilize all the police to the bridge, disregarding the safety of ordinary citizens? You are really way off the mark." She said vaguely, her face pale, "Life is very precious." Yes, a life is indeed very precious. So my life doesn't count as a life, does it? I said calmly. She frowned, seemingly aware of her mistake and unsure how to respond. I continued, stating that the car and the house I owned before marriage were all mine. The car that Michael, my mistress, is driving now is also my premarital property. You can either give me the keys and let him leave or pay $500,000 to buy the car. Emma helplessly replied, "Where am I supposed to find $500,000? Do you mean that since we got married, you haven't contributed any money to the family, and I've been the one supporting you all this time, yet you haven't saved a single cent? Did all the money go to your mistress? The other party seemed a bit displeased, and in the end, they felt like they gained nothing, only ending up with the title of a good friend. I looked at her, and my frustration suddenly lightened a lot. John, do you know? Your constant nitpicking is really unbearable. I smiled. If I annoy you, at least it's good for me. I'm just afraid you'll cling to me. Since you're so bothered, why not just sign the divorce agreement, go earn some money to buy a car and find someone else? She clenched her teeth and picked up the pen to sign the divorce agreement. Rubbing her forehead, she paused for a moment before saying, "Do you know why I treat Michael so well? Because he is sincere and kind, unlike you, who is always calculating and full of doubts." Emma threw down the car keys, and as I watched her back, I couldn't help but shed tears. You caused me a lot of pain in my past life for Michael, and you never cared about me at all. In this lifetime, I won't stop you anymore. I want to see how this woman with nothing manages to save her first love in her heart. Emma asked Michael to get out of the car, and a look of dissatisfaction appeared on his face. With a furrowed brow, Michael pulled Emma over to confront me, seeking an explanation. Upon entering the cafe, he spotted me and immediately launched into his performance. "You heartless man. You've divorced Emma and left her with nothing. Despite the years of marriage and the fading feelings, there was still some connection. How could you not give her some consideration?" I just smiled. Clean break? I took away all the property I owned before the marriage. Emma probably didn't get a single penny. That car was bought before our marriage, and I don't want the other woman getting in it. Is there something wrong with that? Michael tried to play the victim, but I shot him a glare. I don't want anything to do with those unclean people. If you think she's precious, then cherish her well. Actually, I'm quite curious, Michael. You have severe depression, so why have you never gone to the hospital for treatment or taken medication? Did you diagnose yourself? He jumped up in anger, trying to grab my hair, and shouted, "It's all your fault." I felt confused because I didn't know Michael at all before marrying Emma. Yet Emma said, "John, you really owe Michael an apology." "I don't understand," she continued. "You bullied him in high school." I immediately became agitated. "That's right, you were the one who bullied me during high school." I asked in confusion, "Which high school?" He slightly raised an eyebrow, as if he had anticipated my question. I said I went to No. 1 high school, and he replied that he was from No. 2 high school. Anyway, I remember that you used to bully me. I was left speechless. If I'm not mistaken, you all should have attended the same high school, right? If I bullied him, you wouldn't know that, would you, Emma? Emma was taken aback for a moment, a hint of coldness appearing in her eyes. I was so focused on my studies at that time that I didn't have the time to pay attention to these things. I waved my hand helplessly and said to Michael with a smile, "I'm really sorry to let you down. I stayed in the city until I graduated from college. I returned here because it's my parents' hometown. Should I check the education registration website to show you? Or should I directly contact one of my high school classmates?" Michael felt confused. The distance of over 1,500 kilometers left him unsure of how to get help. At that moment, he felt very embarrassed and didn't know what to do. Seeing him being exposed, I couldn't help but laugh. Emma's face turned pale as she gasped, "It's impossible. If you're not from our high school, then Michael, why have you been lying to me all this time?" She never expected the truth to be like this. Thinking she was standing up for justice, she ended up being the one deceived. She turned around stiffly to face a visibly anxious Michael. "Didn't you say your severe depression was due to the bullying from John in high school, which made you feel unsafe and that life was meaningless? Was it all just to deceive me? What exactly is your intention in doing this?" My reaction to John, "Were you just using me?" Michael didn't dare to look up at Emma. Emma stepped forward and grabbed his shoulders, asking, "Why aren't you saying anything? Don't you have depression? You aren't trying to deceive me, are you?" She exerted too much force, causing Michael to cry out in pain. He was frightened by the woman in front of him and couldn't help but start crying. Emma urged him, "Come on, let's go to the hospital right now to check if you have depression." Michael struggled to break free and firmly replied, "I don't have depression. This matter is not something I forced upon you. Did you choose to be with me just because I asked you to leave your husband? Did I force you to be with me, or to take off your clothes? I don't have depression, but Emma, you are simply not a good person. You are just looking for excuses to justify your own infidelity. I was just speaking based on your thoughts, and now it has become my fault? A crowd began to gather around us, and some people recognized Michael, whispering among themselves. Michael? Isn't he the former star? Back in high school, he dated several girls, but it got exposed, and as a result, he was beaten up in the bathroom by one of the boyfriends of the girls he dated. Later, it seemed that he was also involved as a third party in a relationship. When the original partner found out and came to the school, he was expelled. What's happened again today? People around were discussing this, and Emma heard them. She realized that her mistake had become a topic of conversation, which made Michael a bit flustered. He hurriedly said, "Emma, don't listen to them. I can explain." Michael tried to take Emma's hand, but she immediately shook it off. She looked at him and said with a bitter smile, "You didn't drop out because of depression. It was because you were forced to leave school for being the other woman. How dare you lie to me? I'm so foolish for believing such an obvious lie." Michael noticed the disgust in her eyes, but he no longer cared. "Do you think you should blame me now? Why didn't you blame me back then when you were in bed saying you wanted to divorce your husband and marry me? You enjoyed all of this, yet now I'm the only one left to bear the consequences." He said this while clapping his hands. Emma wanted to explain, but I interrupted her, sarcastically saying, "Right, you and Michael are just friends, completely innocent." I continued, "You know what? Every time you two hang out, Michael sends me pictures of you in bed." Emma's eyes widened in shock. In the past, she had been ambiguous with Michael, using her depression as an excuse to hide the fact that she had been deceived, but the evidence of his infidelity made her feel ashamed. Angry, Emma turned and slapped Michael. She exclaimed, "I'm with you because you wanted me here. How could you do this?" The argument between them escalated. In a fit of anger, Michael threw a coffee cup from the table at Emma's head, instantly causing blood to spill. Emma picked up a shard of glass and made a cut on Michael's neck, then carved the words "bastard" on his face. Michael's trachea was severed, leaving him unable to speak. He could only plead for help with his eyes, thinking to himself, "Help, I'm still young. I don't want to die." However, by the time the ambulance arrived, it was too late for Michael. Holding the piece of glass, Emma stood in the pool of blood and was arrested. The customers in the cafe stared in shock. After Michael's death, I also went to the police station to cooperate with the investigation. The police investigated Michael and found that he was in good health, with no illnesses at all. The so-called depression was obviously a lie. Michael's parents demanded a compensation of $3 million from Emma, stating that they would issue a letter of release only if the payment was made. Emma's mother helplessly came to me for assistance. "John, Emma has also been influenced by bad people. Can you forgive her? You've been together for so many years and have gone through a lot. I'm begging you, help her out." I replied, "Aunt, why do you think I should forgive her? That day she almost caused my death. If the rescuers had arrived just a bit later, I might not be alive. If she really loved me, why didn't she think of me while she was entangled with Michael? All of this was her own choice. She can't blame anyone else. I'm not so kind-hearted. To the person who hurt me, I hope she gets the retribution she deserves." I hung up the phone with a cold laugh. In the last second before hanging up, Emma heard her aunt's final apology. These 3 words seemed powerless. No one wants to hear the words "I'm sorry." Everyone hopes to be treated with seriousness and respect. Emma did not withdraw her letter of understanding towards her aunt. Her aunt intentionally harmed others, leading to death, and her previous negligent actions had also been reported. In the end, she was sentenced to life imprisonment for multiple crimes. I was not trapped by these people and events. I decided to start anew and live a more vibrant life. I sold my car and house, and with all the money I had, I went to a rural elementary school to teach. I built a warm dormitory for the children. Despite the cold wind, everyone's enthusiasm remained high. Every time I saw smiling faces coming out of the mountains, I felt the children's radiant smiles, full of vitality and hope. This is our life.